Over the weekend, top U.S. political advisors went on national television and they just went on the offensive against the tech industry.
Yeah, completely attack them.
Right, but, they weren't attacking foreign hackers, and they weren't going after adversarial nation states either. They were actually attacking America's own most successful AI company.
Which is pretty wild to see.
It's super wild. So today, for our deep dive, we are looking at exactly why the U.S. government is suddenly treating its own, Silicon Valley star players as a potential national security liability.
Because that is exactly what's happening.
Right. And we're unpacking this really brief but just incredibly dense report from the AI News Daily Digest, which details this fascinating piece that was recently published in Technology Review.
It's a really profound shift, I think, because we're basically watching the whole vocabulary around artificial intelligence just change overnight.
Yeah.
Like, we're moving away from the language of, consumer innovation and Silicon Valley disruption. And we are heavily, heavily leaning into the language of global dominance and deterrence and national security.
And that transition is exactly our mission for today. We're going to unpack all of that for you. But before we really get into the mechanics here, I just want to establish some ground rules for you, the listener.
Always a good idea.
Yeah, because today's source material touches heavily on international relations, specifically, the dynamic between the United States and China. And it also involves some very politically charged figures here in the U.S.
Right, some very polarizing names.
Exactly. So just to be completely transparent, this deep dive is not taking any political sides. We are not here to endorse or criticize the policies of any specific administration or, any political party.
Wait, that's not what we do.
Nope. Our job is just to act as your impartial guides. We're just mapping out the ideas, the anxieties, and the facts exactly as they are reported in the Technology Review piece. We're here to understand the landscape, basically not to vote on it.
Which is an essential baseline, honestly. Because to truly grasp the magnitude of what is happening in the AI sector right now, you really have to look at the underlying mechanics.
Right.
You have to understand why these political figures are reacting with such urgency, completely regardless of your personal politics. The geopolitical stakes are just moving way too fast for anything less than a completely objective analysis.
Yeah, I agree. So, okay, let's get right into the catalyst then. Because this weekend spat is just, well, it's jarring.
It really is.
You have several of President Donald Trump's current and former advisors publicly going on the offensive against domestic tech elites. And normally, right, the standard political playbook for national security is to unify the domestic front against an external threat.
Well, you band together. Right. You don't usually point the weapons inward at the very companies that are basically perceived as the crown jewels of American innovation. It's like watching the coaches of a national sports team suddenly start yelling at their own star players right before the Olympics.
That's a really good analogy, actually. But, you don't do that unless you fundamentally believe those star players are misinterpreting the assignment.
Wait, meaning what? Exactly.
Well, this tension highlights a massive, just growing disconnect between two very different worlds. So on one side, you have the borderless, open source, kind of rapid iteration culture of Silicon Valley.
Move fast and break things.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have the highly territorial, zero-sum, security-focused reality of Washington.
Two totally different mindsets.
Right. And for a long time, Washington basically assumed that as long as American tech companies were the most profitable and, the most famous in the world, that the United States was inherently winning the tech race.
Oh, I see. And now it's as if the government suddenly realized that an open source software firm is essentially sitting on a stockpile of digital uranium, and they are begging them to stop treating it like a standard commercial product.
That is a very apt way to look at it. The political apparatus isn't looking at quarterly earnings or active daily users anymore. They are looking at global leverage.
And they think they're losing it.
Right. Right now, these advisors feel like that leverage is slipping.
Oh.
They are essentially accusing the domestic tech sector of not moving strategically enough to secure the nation's position.
Interesting.
So they're attacking their own champions because they feel those champions are just playing a commercial game while the rest of the world is basically playing a geopolitical game.
Hold on, though. Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because tech companies outpace each other literally all the time.
Sure.
I mean, we saw it with smartphones, we saw it with social media platforms, we see it with electric vehicles right now. And the source text points directly to China's recent and rapid advancements in sophisticated AI models as the trigger for all this panic.
Yep, that's the catalyst.
But why does China releasing a better, software model suddenly elevate this from a standard market share problem to a full-blown national security crisis among political elites? Like, why is a smart chatbot different from a cheaper electric car?
Well, because treating AI as just a smart chatbot or a standard piece of commercial software is exactly the mindset that Washington is desperately trying to break.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the technology review piece uses a very specific phrase. It calls it altering the global balance of technological power. AI is no longer viewed by these advisors as just an application. It's being viewed as fundamental infrastructure.
Okay, infrastructure.
Right, so think about it less like a new smartphone and more like the invention of the electrical grid or, the combustion engine.
I hear that, but couldn't you have said the exact same thing about the internet in 1995?
You could have, yeah.
And the government didn't step in and take over Silicon Valley then. They basically let the free market build the internet, and arguably, that worked out incredibly well for American dominance. So why is AI inherently more dangerous to leave to the open market?
That's a really great pushback. But the difference really lies in the speed of optimization and the direct military and strategic applications of it.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So the internet was basically a communication protocol, right?
Mhm.
It connected things. AI is an optimization engine. It solves things.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
So if an adversarial nation develops an AI model that is significantly more sophisticated than yours, they don't just get a better search engine. They get a tool that could theoretically optimize a military supply chain in seconds.
Oh, wow.
Right. They get a system that is capable of autonomously discovering zero-day vulnerabilities
Aye.
in a nation's power grid, like overnight. They get economic modeling that can predict and manipulate market fluctuations way faster than human analysts can even read the data.
Okay, so it's not just about who sells the most software subscriptions. It's really about who has the cognitive advantage across literally every single sector of society simultaneously.
Precisely. It is a general-purpose technology that dictates the efficiency of everything else.
Mhm.
So for these political advisors, falling behind in sophisticated AI models isn't just losing a market. It means your rival can potentially outthink and outmaneuver you on every conceivable front.
That is terrifying.
Yeah, it is the new metric for global power.
All right, so let's dig into the actual mechanics of China's advancements here, because the text touches on this, and I think it's vital context for you guys listening.
Absolutely.
Because for a long time, the narrative in the West was that China was great at scaling technology or, maybe copying technology, but not necessarily driving fundamental innovation from scratch.
Right, that was the assumption.
Especially since the U.S. implemented those massive export controls on the high-end computer chips needed to train these AI models. So how are they making these massive leaps?
This is exactly where the engineering reality collides with the policy reality.
Okay.
Because the U.S. tried to choke off China's AI development by restricting their access to the most advanced GPUs, the physical hardware chips required to train massive AI systems.
Right. The thought was no chips, no AI.
Exactly. The assumption was if they don't have the chips, they can't build the models. But the source material highlights that this constraint actually forced an entirely different kind of innovation.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. Because instead of just throwing massive amounts of raw computing power at a problem, which frankly has largely been the American approach, Chinese developers have been forced to become incredibly efficient with the limited hardware they actually have. Yeah, they are innovating in algorithmic efficiency. They're finding ways to train highly sophisticated models using way fewer parameters and optimizing their code to just squeeze every ounce of performance out of older, less advanced chips.
That is fascinating. So the export controls might have inadvertently created a leaner, more efficient engineering culture, while U.S. companies are just kind of burning through mountains of unrestricted capital and hardware.
Yeah, and that is a very real anxiety in Washington right now. And honestly, it explains the frustration of the political advisors.
Because they're watching this happen.
Right. They're looking at Silicon Valley, seeing all the advantages of basically unlimited capital and the best hardware in the world, and yet a constrained rival is still managing to close the gap through sheer algorithmic ingenuity.
Wow. Okay, so if Washington is treating this like an overarching infrastructure threat, who is actually tasked with managing it?
Well, there's a specific person mentioned.
Right. The text specifically highlights one key player at the center of this weekend's events, kind of to put a human face on this policy push, and that is David Sachs.
Yes. And his inclusion in this narrative is incredibly revealing, I think, about how the political apparatus is structuring its approach to these technologies.
Yeah, the detail the text provides about his background is what really caught my eye, because it refers to Sachs as the former AI and crypto czar for the president.
Yeah, it's quite the title.
Let's pause on that title for a second.
AI.
AI and crypto czar. Because to a lot of people, combining those two fields under one policy umbrella sounds totally bizarre.
It does seem a bit disjointed at first glance.
Right, because you have artificial intelligence, which is essentially applied statistics and supercomputing, and then you have cryptocurrency, which a lot of people just view as highly volatile digital casinos. So why bundle them together? Like, what is the actual technical synergy that justifies one person overseeing both?
It seems disjointed on the surface, sure. But functionally, it makes perfect sense if you were looking at the architecture of the next generation internet.
Okay, explain that.
You have to look at what both technologies fundamentally do. So cryptocurrency provides decentralized, borderless financial rails, and artificial intelligence provides automated, scalable intelligence.
Right.
If you control both of those things, you essentially control the nervous system of the future digital economy.
Break that down a bit more for me. How do they actually interact in practice?
Well, think about the concept of autonomous AI agents. We're moving toward a future where AI isn't just a chatbot that answers your questions. It's an agent that acts on your behalf.
Like an assistant that can actually do stuff.
Exactly. Imagine an AI agent tasked with managing a supply chain. It needs to negotiate prices, it needs to sign contracts, and it has to actually pay vendors.
Okay.
It can't easily do that through a traditional banking system, right?
Yeah.
Because banks require human identity verification, social security numbers, and it takes days to clear a wire transfer.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that. But it can do that instantly using crypto.
Yes, exactly. And machine intelligence can easily hold a crypto wallet, it can execute a smart contract on a blockchain, and it can transfer digital value in literally milliseconds without any human intervention or traditional banking oversight.
That is wild.
Right. AI is the brain, and crypto is the payment rail. Together, they create an entirely new automated economic layer that operates completely outside traditional sovereign control.
That makes total sense now. So if you are the U.S. government, you can't regulate them in silos.
No, you can't.
You can't have the SEC looking at crypto as just a security, while the Department of Commerce looks at AI as just software. You need a centralized strategy because they are inevitably going to merge into a single autonomous ecosystem.
And that is exactly why you appoint a czar. In American political terminology, you don't appoint a czar for something routine.
Right, it's usually for a crisis.
Exactly. A czar is appointed when an issue is considered an urgent, overarching crisis that cuts across traditional department boundaries. Sachs's role was specifically designed to oversee and protect U.S. dominance in these foundational intertwined areas.
Which makes his public frustration over the weekend so much more significant. I mean, he isn't just a random pundit shouting on a Sunday morning talk show.
Hopefully not.
He is someone who is specifically tasked with the architecture of this dominance, and he is sounding the alarm that the domestic tech sector is moving way too slowly.
Yeah, his public alarm validates that the fear of being outpaced is a central burning concern at the highest levels of political advisory. It's basically the distress signal proving that the political apparatus feels the U.S. grip on these foundational technologies is slipping.
So let's take all of this, the weekend spat, the anxiety over China's algorithmic efficiency, the merging of AI and crypto policy, and kind of figure out what it actually means for you, the listener.
Yeah, let's tie it together.
Because if this policy shifts, it doesn't just change the mood in Washington. It fundamentally changes the tools we all use every day. Because the government is going to start dictating what AI is legally allowed to do and who is allowed to build it.
That's the reality we're facing.
Right. And the technology review piece warns that the implications of China's advancements are poised to directly influence U.S. policy and strategic decisions. So what does that actually look like in real life?
Honestly, it looks like the end of the open source era for frontier technology.
Wow, really? The end of it?
I think so, yeah. For the past decade, AI development has largely existed in this kind of academic vacuum. Researchers published their papers openly, developers shared open source code on platforms like GitHub, and companies just hired talent globally.
Right. The driving ethos was basically just scientific discovery.
Exactly. But by officially viewing AI as a political battleground, That era is closing. The technology is now irrevocably tethered to national security.
But wait, how do you actually enforce that? You mentioned earlier that the U.S. restricted computer chips, which, are physical goods you can stop at a border.
Yep, tangible things.
But if an AI model is essentially just a massive file of weights and parameters, basically a giant mathematical equation, how do you stop it from crossing borders? I mean, you can't put math in a shipping container.
No, you definitely can't.
A multi-billion-dollar open-source AI model could theoretically fit on a standard flash drive.
That is the exact nightmare scenario keeping policymakers awake at night. You're absolutely right. You cannot easily put export controls on software code once it's out in the wild.
Right.
If a U.S. company open sources a state-of-the-art model today, an engineer in Beijing or Moscow can download it in seconds, tweak it, and use it for their own strategic purposes.
So how does the government step in then? Do they just ban open source entirely? Because that would completely gut the American startup ecosystem.
Yeah, banning open source entirely would be incredibly destructive to domestic innovation, which obviously puts the government in a terrible bind.
So what's the alternative?
What we are likely going to see is a shift toward what's called compute governance.
Compute governance. Okay, what is that?
Well, since they can't track the software easily, they will try to track and control the physical hardware. The massive data centers required to actually train and run these huge models.
Oh, I see.
We might see regulations where tech companies have to essentially acquire a government license before they are allowed to train an AI model beyond a certain size or capability threshold.
Wait, so if I'm a developer in San Francisco and I want to push the boundaries of an AI model, I might suddenly find myself needing clearance from the Department of Defense just to rent server space.
It is entirely possible. We could see mandatory reporting requirements for large training runs. We might see strict restrictions on foreign investment in U.S. AI startups, or, limits on the ability of American companies to partner with international researchers.
That changes everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
The government will no longer be a passive observer of the tech industry. It will demand that the industry actively aligns with national defense priorities. They want the tech companies to build walled gardens around their best innovations.
And that brings us full circle, really, to why these advisors were yelling at the companies this past weekend. They are trying to force that alignment before the hammer of policy officially drops.
Yikes.
They're demanding the tech industry wake up to the geopolitical reality, stop acting like, global citizens of the internet, and start acting like American defense assets.
Precisely. They are signaling that the days of pure, unencumbered commercial development are just ending. The trajectory of artificial intelligence is now firmly bound to the trajectory of geopolitical rivalry.
Right.
The tech companies want to build products that change the world, but Washington wants them to build moats that protect the nation. And those two goals are just increasingly in direct conflict.
It is a profound realization, and it really reframes how we should read the news about tech moving forward. Let's do a quick recap of the journey we've taken on today's deep dive. We started with this highly unusual weekend spat where Trump's current and former advisors publicly attacked America's own leading tech companies.
Yeah, a real shock to the system.
Right. And we traced the root of that seemingly backward criticism to a deep systemic anxiety over China's rapid advancements in AI specifically, how chip bans forced them to become incredibly efficient at algorithmic innovation.
Which is a huge unintended consequence.
Definitely. Then we unpacked the wild but ultimately logical pairing of AI and crypto under one policy czar, realizing they form the brain and nervous system of a new digital economy.
The agent and the payment rail.
Exactly. And finally, we looked at how this anxiety is basically threatening to kill the open source era, forcing a future where the government regulates computer servers just to stop math from crossing borders.
It's a transition that will undoubtedly define the next decade of both technology and international relations. We're basically watching the architecture of the future being renegotiated in real time.
We really are. And as we wrap up today, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final lingering thought to chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Something that builds on everything we've discussed about AI becoming this ultimate geopolitical infrastructure. If sophisticated AI models are now officially viewed by world leaders not as consumer goods, but as the primary metric of national security,
Right.
will governments eventually start treating the development of artificial intelligence less like building commercial software and more like the stockpiling of strategic weapons?
Oh, wow.
And if so, what happens to the companies sitting on the largest arsenals?
That is the defining question of this new era.
And it's one we will all have to watch unfold together. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Remember, the world is moving incredibly fast, so stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking the big questions. We'll catch you next time.